Hello. Today we are going to do section 16.3, 16.4, and 16.5. 16.3 is called The Crisis Deepens, and it's just more on the divide between the North and the South in the United States in the 1850s. So, start off with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and it's about as boring as it sounds. But these two states were originally part of Nebraska. As the Nebraska Territory, there was no such thing as Kansas, but they wanted to split in two, and they had to decide, kind of what to be done with that. Well, Stephen Douglas of Illinois introduced a bill that would split these into two and let the voters decide if they were to be free or slave states. So there was a lot of arguing and a lot of debate about that, and especially by the North, because technically they could both be free states. So, with all the debates, people actually started moving into these states so they could decide whether or not to vote for or against it. People would like pack up all their stuff, their kids and everything, and move to Kansas or move to Nebraska. In Kansas, slavery was legalized, but many people disagreed, and they actually started their own government. And it led to a lot of fighting in Kansas, and it was actually known as Bloody Kansas for a while because there was so much fighting and so much turmoil going on in that state that people were pretty scared of what was going on or what could happen. So a lot of fighting back and forth between the North and the South, or excuse me, between people in Kansas alone. About the same time came a very, 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 very important thing called the Dred Scott case. And this is a picture of Dred Scott. And the case was actually Dred Scott versus Sandiford. And let me tell you a little bit about Dred Scott. He was a slave and lived with a slave owner, and they lived in Missouri and went to Illinois, went to Wisconsin, which was a free territory. And during that time, when they were in Illinois and in Wisconsin, which was not even a state, he was basically free. Dred Scott would have been, but he chose to stay with his owner. And when they finally moved back to Missouri, his owner died. And he thought he should be free because when he lived in Wisconsin, especially, it wasn't even part of the United States. It wasn't a state at the time, and it was a free territory, so he should have been free. And this case went all the way to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court had to decide, do we think that he should be free or that he should still be a slave? And the Supreme Court said no, that he should still be a slave, that he was not going to be free. And this caused a lot of turmoil, a lot of angry people, and part of the reason for that, their decision was they said that it is unconstitutional to make a territory be for or against slavery. It says nothing in the Constitution that we are able to say that something that hasn't started yet, that isn't a state yet, that it's going to be free or it's going to be slavery. So that made the whole Missouri Compromise unconstitutional. That whole thing where we said, okay, if you're south of Missouri, you're a slave. If you're north, you're free. They said we couldn't do that. That was not legal to do at the time, and so it pretty much meant all that stuff was for nothing. So there was chaos throughout the country. People didn't know what was free and what wasn't, and just lots of problems because of this. Also, during this time period, the Republican Party, as we know it more today, was officially formed. Most people wanted to stop the spread of slavery, but some Republicans wanted slavery stopped altogether. So the difference is if you want to stop the spread of it, is kind of like the coronavirus. You don't want it to keep spreading anymore, and while others wanted the slavery just to be stopped altogether, like we're just going to get rid of it. So that was kind of the Republican view on slavery. In 1858, there was a Republican by the name of Abe Lincoln. You heard of him before. He challenged Stephen Douglas for a Senate spot in the great state of Illinois. And they had a series of debates. And these were very famous debates between Lincoln and Douglas and Lincoln. And this picture is one that it's a drawing, obviously, but it was of a debate that the two had in the state of Illinois, obviously. I'm saying obviously a lot tonight. In the town of Charleston, which is the same Charleston that is just 60 miles away from us. So that was supposed to be in Charleston. But the two had a series of debates, and Douglas thought that the state should decide on their own about slavery. Lincoln was against it, but he was not trying to get rid of it completely. He kind of knew, okay, let's not get rid of this altogether, because if I say I want to do that, then people that are for it aren't gonna vote for me, and so on. And Douglas thought, hey, let's let the states decide. So ended up Douglas won the election, but this is not the last time that the two of them will meet against each other. They will run again in 2 years, and it would not be for the Senate seat in Illinois. It would be for the President of the United States. So, Section 18 or 16.5, I really wish these were coming in one at a time instead of all together. Section 16.5, a nation divides. Lincoln won the election of 1860. So he became the president. So he lost to Douglas in the Illinois Senate race, but he won 2 years later the presidential race. He controlled the vote in the North, but listen to this. He did not win any Southern states. None. Zero. So this made the South realize how little say they had in the government. If a guy can run and win 0 states in the South, yet still be the president, how much power does the South really have? And they're like, none. We don't have any power at all if this is the case. So the South started to talk seriously about secession, and that means leaving the Union to form their own. So they started getting really serious about seceding from the Union. Here, hold on. No, I don't have. Thought I had a picture of the electoral votes. Anyway, I guess I don't have a picture of the electoral votes, but all of the votes, like I said, in the South went to other people. There were other people that ran besides just Lincoln and Douglas, but other people won all the Southern ones, and Lincoln won all the Northern ones. So he was elected president. On December the 20th, 1860, South Carolina became the first state to secede. They left the Union, and they were soon joined by Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. And they started their own country. They declared their independence, just like we declared our independence from England. They declared their independence from the United States, and they called themselves the Confederate States of America. And they even named their own president. Their president was a guy named Jefferson Davis. And the Confederate Army started taking control of all the forts in the South. So they were like, "Hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to fight for our independence, and we're going to become free. So we're going to have two countries side by side: the United States of America and the Confederate States of America." Well, they started taking control of the forts, but one of the few they didn't control was in South Carolina, and it was called Fort Sumter. And President Lincoln was trying to help control this area and keep it in the northern hands. So he was wanting to ship food to the fort because the supplies were running low, but he was not allowed to. And the South attacked the fort and actually took it over from the United States government control. And those were the first shots, the first battle, basically, of the Civil War. So after Fort Sumter, the Civil War had begun. And there just a couple pictures. That's what Fort Sumter looks like today. No, I did not take that picture. And then that's just a picture of Fort Sumter from before. So I will try to share something that has the electoral votes from the election of 1860 with you, just so you can kind of see it because you understand the Electoral College now. But basically, in this chapter, a lot of fighting over what should be free, what should be slave, ends up at the end saying the whole Missouri Compromise was illegal, but then at the very, very end, those other states seceded the Union, these states right here, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, and they formed their own country. They were the Confederate States of America and not the United States of America. So things were getting very bad in the United States, and that is where we will pick up hopefully when we come back to school. So I will stop it here.